Well, we're grateful for you. Thanks for coming. I got a message I'd love to share called A Whale of a Story. A Whale of a Story. We're still in a series working through the minor prophets. Pastor Marquise in the house, sitting right here on the front row, will be preaching next weekend. Y'all show some love to Pastor Marquise. Come on, bro, stand up, shoot some deuces, do something. Come on, man, what's up? That's my guy. Love that dude. Grateful for our team. My wife and I, my kids will take some space, just need a break. I'm realizing as coaches and counselors are speaking, going, Ed, listen, preaching 5 times a weekend at the number of times. This is a marathon, so make sure you take the time you need. And so we're going to get away, and we'll be back the following weekend. So, but man, to know that we got this quality of communicators on our staff team, Pastor Hutch, Pastor Marquise, we just got some great people. So, man, make sure you come back next weekend. I want to share a message about Jonah. Let me just give you a little insight as you get to Jonah. I got upgraded on a flight. This was several years ago before I came to CBC. Had basketball shorts on, tank top, hair down to my shoulders, flat bill, cocked to the side. And, man, I was sitting down, and this dude next to me in first class, he looked at me a little bit smug. He goes, so what do you do for a living? I could tell he didn't think I belonged. Everything in me wanted to say, I'm a professional skateboarder on my way to the X Games. That's everything in me. Because I knew as soon as what I was about to say, it would cause him to question, and it might, and if I could just say this out loud, I wasn't trying to have a Jesus conversation at 6 a.m. Is it okay if I just admit that? Like, there's sometimes you're like, oh, I ain't feeling that. It's 6 a.m. Got up at 4. I don't feel real spiritual at 6 a.m. sometimes. But I said it. I was like, I'm a preacher. His first response, so you believe that Jonah was swallowed by a whale? I was like, hey, man, my name's Ed. Nice to meet you. What's your name? He's like, no, for real. Do you believe that Jonah was swallowed by a whale? I want to say to you what I said to him. I said, hey, man, if it's good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for me. He was like, what do you mean by that? I said, Jesus said in the Gospel of Matthew, he said it this way, just as Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 days and 3 nights, so must the Son of Man be in the belly of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. It's called the sign of Jonah. I said, if it's good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for me. And I want to say this to you today as we talk about a story that oftentimes gets relegated and delegated as a kid's story. It's got profound implications. I want to begin with a target statement. Here's the target statement. God's providence will always get you to his purpose. God's providence will always get you to his purpose. We serve a creative God, a God that uses all of his ability and sovereignty to get you to the place that you need to be. I want to give you, and don't be discouraged by this, 8 points. We're going to click them off quickly, I promise you. But it just outlines the book of Jonah. Verse 1, give us point number 1. But let me read verse 1. Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, arise and go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it, for its evils, or their evils, have come up before me. Point number 1, write this down. We see a call to go. A call to go. Has God ever asked you a question to do something and your response was no? Now here's what you need to know about Nineveh. This call to go, Nineveh was not the top 10 destination locations on Travelocity. What you need to know about Nineveh is Nineveh and the Ninevites were known as stone cold killers. Man, they filleted people alive. They impaled people over the stake and let the sun scorch their bodies. They buried people alive in such a way that not just skinning them alive, but burying them alive, but also would decapitate people, put their heads at the city gates as to say, this is what's going to happen to you. This would be the equivalent of God telling you to go talk to MS-13, ISIS, Boko Haram, and you'd have been like, send Pastor Ed. We ain't trying to do that. So when we look at Jonah and he gets a call to go to the Ninevites, he's like, no, thank you. Point number 2, write this down. We see a call to go. Number 2, we see a place to run. Place to run. Verse 3, but Jonah rose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord, and he went down to Joppa, and found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid the fare, went down into it to go with them to Tarshish, away from the presence of the Lord. There are 3 characteristics about who God is and his nature. He's omnipotent, all-powerful, omniscient, all-knowing, but he's also omnipresent, which means he's everywhere all at the same time. And for those of you that think that you can outrun God, go to a place where he's not, good luck with that. It ain't going to work. In your effort to proverbially pull the Heisman move from God, stiff-arm him, he's on the other side. God is always everywhere at the same time. But this moment of Jonah fleeing from the presence of the Lord, because it's mentioned twice, is him resigning from his prophetic calling on his life. He's like, God, I'll do anything, but I ain't doing that. So basically he goes, I'm done. I resign. I love what Pastor Marquise told me in between services, because you'll see that Jonah in verse 3 paid a fare to go to Tarshish. He actually had to pay to get on the boat. And I love how Pastor Marquise said this. He says, sometimes when it comes to you fleeing from God, it'll cost you everything. It'll cost you everything. It'll take more money than you ever thought. It'll take you further than you ever thought. You give the enemy an inch, he'll take a mile. And sometimes you just thought it was just going to be some temporary pleasure, and it ends up taking everything you got. But you'll see that Jonah tries to flee from the presence of the Lord in the Bible. Let me give you a geotag. Let's map quest this so you just understand the significance. He's in Jerusalem. God tells him to go to Nineveh. That's 500 miles. He goes south, actually goes in a different direction, and he gets in a boat and he goes to Tarshish, which is 2,000 miles. He tries to actually go to the other side of the globe. He's trying to run from the presence of the Lord. But point number 3, write this down. Not only do we see a place to run, but number 3, we see a storm that blows. Verse 4, but the Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea, and there was a mighty tempest on the sea, so the ship was threatened to break up. We don't know if this is a cyclone. We don't know if this is a typhoon. We don't know if this is a hurricane, but I promise you it did not show up on weatherchannel.com. These dudes were like, hey man, it's 100% sunshine, and all of a sudden, here's what happens. The weather changes, and the boat's beginning to unravel at the seams. The captain goes down into the belly of the vessel of this boat, and Jonah is fast asleep. And I wrote this in the margin of my Bible, that sin will exhaust you. You'll see that in Psalm 51. David would say this when he committed that sin against Bathsheba, that it sapped his strength. Sin will feel fun for a moment, then you'll find yourself, it'll deplete you of every bit of energy. And here's Jonah down in the belly of the boat, this flotation device that's coming apart. And the captain's like, bro, what are you doing? Wake up, O sleeper. How can you sleep when there is such calamity? And then verse 7, I want you to write this down. We see point number 4, a crew that knows. There's a crew that knows what's going on. In verse 7, they said to one another, come, let us cast lots that we may know on whose account this evil has come upon us. As to say, things were good till somebody got on this boat, and we got to find out who this dude is. So guess what they did? They assigned numbers on dice. Let me just give a hypothetical. They gave the number 4 to Jonah and these mariners. Yahtzee. And at that moment, number 4, Jonah, they confront Jonah. They're like, dude, what have you done to bring about such calamity upon us? He says in verse 9, he goes, I'm a Hebrew. That's what he says. I fear the Lord who made the sea and the dry land. And then these brothers got afraid and said, what have you done? For the men knew that he was fleeing from the presence of the Lord because he had told them. I want to say this to somebody. Oftentimes when we think that we can escape the call on our life to follow him and serve him, and we try to run from God, here's what I need you to know, that God in creative ways starts putting other people in your life that already know what you're doing. You'll go get a cup of coffee, and somebody go, hey, and they're sliding your Frappuccino across the counter, and they go, I felt like the Lord told me to tell you this. You don't even know that person. You're at the barber shop, beauty shop, all of a sudden, just feel led to say. Anytime the qualifier of, I felt led to say this to you, that's God trying to get your attention. And here's what you need to know, that sometimes in some way, God in creative means and measures puts people in your life to remind you of what God's doing in your life. And it'll come from some least likely of places. These men start speaking into Jonah's life. This crew knew, and guess what happens? They confront Jonah. Jonah's like, hey man, just do this. Do me a solid. Throw me in. They're like, excuse me? So they try to row harder. Finally, in verse number 14, they called out to the Lord, which is the God of Jonah, our God. Let us not perish from this man's life. Lay not on us this innocent blood. For you, O Lord, have done as it pleased. And I love verse 16. So they picked up Jonah, hurled him out. They're like, love you, Jonah, but you got to go. God bless you. He gets in the water. In the water. Storm stops. Point number 5, write this down. We see a fish to catch. A fish to catch. The Bible says in verse 17, and the Lord appointed a great fish to swallow up Jonah. Now, whales are mammals, fish, cold-blooded. So we're like, what kind of fish is this? This could have been a great whale shark, some would say. But let's just put on the screen right now behind me a massive whale. Imagine you're thrown overboard. And by the way, this does not do justice potentially to the size of this fish. You're like, Ed, this is a part of the story where I'm out. Like, I can't believe this. Well, 2021, a guy named Michael Packard was checking, he was scuba diving, checking on some lobster that he was trying to catch. And all of a sudden, as he was checking on this, swallowed by a whale. You're like, fact check, 2021, humpback whale, tells the story, Michael Packard, swallowed by a humpback whale, 30 to 45 seconds, spit him out. 2021. Apparently, if you deep dive on this, no pun intended, but what you'll notice, thank you, so I don't even know where that came from. That was amazing. Score. Here's what you need to know, is that this has happened multiple times. So when we look at Jonah's story, we have to understand that the fish, now you recognize where Jonah's at. He's in southern Spain, 2,000 miles away from Nineveh. God scoops him up, a fish to catch, and starts moving him in the direction of where God had him to be. Starts actually leading him in that direction. All the while, this fish is moving in the direction of Nineveh. You'll hear Jonah say in verse 1, then Jonah prayed to the Lord his God from the belly of the fish, cried out, verse 2, called out to the Lord out of my distress. He answered me out of the belly of Sheol. I cried, and you heard my voice. Verse 9, but I, with the voice of thanksgiving, will sacrifice to you. What I vowed, I'll pay. Salvation belongs to the Lord. You know what Jonah was saying? He said the same thing that many of us said. God, if you'll just get me out of this situation, I'll serve you. You ever been there? Now listen, I don't Facebook stalk nobody. If you think like I'm looking at you, he was talking to me. No, I am looking at an audience today of people that I call my brothers and sisters. I don't know what's going on in your life, but hypothetically, I'm just going to just take the chance here that there are potentially people in this room running from God. And God brought you here, and you go, Ed, what's the point of this sermon? This sermon is a big fish. This message is a big fish to scoop you up, help you understand that we serve a God of second chances, and he will get you to the place that he has always intended for you to be, and your mistakes don't define you. Your past does not define you. There's a God that brings big fishes into our life to get us to where we need to be. But Jonah goes, God, if you get me out of this, I'll serve you. But then that fish vomits up Jonah on dry land. Now I want to show you something, because we now see not just the fish to catch, but a city that repents. Verse 5. Let me go back to Jonah 3, verse 1. It says, then the word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time. I love the fact that the Bible would say it. We serve a God of second chances. Arise and go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it of the message I shall tell you. What was Jonah's message? Verse 4. Jonah began to go into the city, go on a day's journey. He called out, yet 40 days and Nineveh shall be overthrown. 8 words. Everybody look right here. 8 words. Hebrew language, actually 5 words. No, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention. It's an honor to be here today. I'd love to show you my prop illustration to make sure that we can connect in nothing. He rolls up in the city. Get right with God, he's going to kill y'all. And they believe him. They're not like, bruh, who are you? They're like, we're listening. How did they listen? Oh, come on, somebody. Brother gets spit up by a fish on the shoreline. You go, okay, that's crazy. But do you know what the God of the Ninevites were? It was a guy named Dagon. You're like, so what? Dagon, huge statue in Nineveh of half man, half fish. They worship a fish god. So when Jonah is big stepping up out of a fish, y'all get right with God, he's going to kill y'all. They're like, yes, sir. And you got to just use your sanctified imagination. Dude looks all crazy. There's 2 types of crazies. There's crazy and then crazy. You know what I'm saying? He's been in the belly of a fish. You got seaweed all over him. Many commentators would say because of the acidic nature in the belly of that fish, he's all bleached out. He looks like Doc off of Back to the Future coming out of the DeLorean. Hair's on fire. He looks like he's been struck by lightning. Get right with God, he's going to kill y'all. And they repent, believe, and God relents. Now, I want to speak this over our nation. Happy 4th of July. It's an incredible honor to live in our great country. Also, for the men and women that defend freedom, God bless you. For those that have gone before us, thank you. But I speak this over our nation. I speak this over the world. Here's what we're asking. God, heal our land, bring restoration, bring revival. I'm talking about old school church basement revival up in our nation. But we got to believe God, confess our sin, and repent. And we need it to happen in the church house. And when God begins to do a work, it'll be because of the fact that we just said, Lord, whatever you tell us to do, I'll do. And Jonah preaches, a city repents. But then I want you to notice this point. We see now point number 7, a preacher that quits. A preacher that quits. Jonah chapter 4, verse 1, but it displeased Jonah exceedingly, and he was angry. He prayed to the Lord. This is one of the greatest verses on the character of God. He prayed to the Lord and said, O Lord, is not this what I said when I was in my country? This is why I made haste to flee to Tarshish, for I knew that you are gracious and a merciful God, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love, relenting from disaster. Therefore now, O Lord, just kill me. And the Lord said, does it do you well to be angry? And Jonah's like, yes, it does. He gets a little sarcastic with God. And you go, okay, we see a preacher that quits. Why is he so perplexed and disturbed? Because these stone cold killers now experience the grace and mercy of God, and he's going, they deserve nothing but justice. Let God pour out your wrath on these men. Pour out your wrath on this town. Pour out your wrath on this nation. And here's what Jonah was failing to recognize. I want you to pay attention to this. The same grace of God that he got in the belly of the fish, he doesn't want these other people to get. See, sometimes in moments when we've been offended by people or hurt by people, we want grace, but we're not willing to extend grace. And Jonah's like, just kill me. And then God, and here's the principle, point number 8, write this down. Not only do we see a preacher that quits, but we see a God who cares. A God who cares. Verse 6, now the Lord God appointed a plant, made it come up over Jonah that it might be shade for his head. Verse 7, but when dawn came up the next day, God appointed a worm that attacked the plant so that it withered. And when the sun rose, God appointed a scorching east wind, and the sun beat down on the head of Jonah so that he was faint, and he asked that he might die. You go, Ed, how is that point number 8? A God who cares. Can I tell you this? Why is point 8 This is because the moment that Jonah's shaking his fist at God, God could have killed him right there. But by grace and mercy, allows him to breathe another breath and then begins to speak to him. At the very end, verse 11 says, Jonah, see the bigger picture. There's 120,000 people that don't know their left hand from their right hand. As to say, they don't know the difference between right and wrong. And that's why I sent you. And not only that, but the Bible ends in one of the most strangest of verses. And there were many cattle. I'm like, God, what do I do with that at 11:45? That's how Jonah's story ends. God bless you. Thank y'all for coming. There were people that didn't know the difference between the left hand and the right hand, and there were many cattle. You go, Ed, what's the point of Jonah? The point of Jonah is that there's a Jonah in all of us. That if we're not careful, we'll run from God. But God, in creative ways, brings big fish in our life to get us where we need to be. Here's the takeaway statement. We'll wrap this up. God is a God of second chances. He turns what we think are mistakes into defining moments. Come on, can we clap to that today? Would that be all right? Takes our mistakes and turns them into defining moments. Now listen, I got about 4 or 5 minutes. I want to share this with you because one of the things that I've always tried to be as a pastor here at CBC is to never stand on a stage, preach a message at you, but really preach it to myself. And here's what I'm going to ask, that you would just listen for just a brief moment. Music's going to begin to play. Piano's going to start to play in just a few moments. But I want you just to listen. When I graduated from college, I had such a bad church experience serving on staff. See, as a senior in high school, I surrendered to ministry as a youth pastor. And as I was going to college, here's what happened. I was serving as a youth pastor while going to college, playing basketball. And I realized for the first time, like working at a church, When you see the backstage pass to it, it's not all roses and gumdrops. Like, you actually meet some pretty mean people. And some of the meanest people I've ever met in my life call themselves Christians and unfortunately sometimes serve at churches. And that's all of us at some level if we're not careful. But I remember I graduated from college and I wanted some space. I was like, God, I'm gonna go to grad school in Memphis. I was in Tampa, Florida at the time, moved to Memphis. My wife and I just got married. And all of a sudden, I said, I just want a real job. Just gonna do a real job. I was so burnt out. I mean, I'd just been a youth pastor for less than a year, and I was like, God, I don't know if I want to do this. So I moved to Memphis. I start unloading trucks. I'm a lumper. For those of you that know what that means when a semi-truck backs up to a warehouse, it was my job to unload it. I'd put it on a pallet, shrink wrap it, pallet jack it, move it to a vicinity, and a forklift will come and get it. I'll never forget, there was a gentleman, about 70 years old, been doing this for a long time, got a cigarette hanging off his lip. It was absolutely phenomenal. He could talk to me and that cigarette just stay on his lip. It was incredible. I was mesmerized by it. And he and I worked together. And he looked at me. He didn't even know my story. He said, man, I think God's got something for you. Just started speaking in my life. So I began to get another job. Had a side hustle. So I tried to go to Logan's. You ever been to Logan's? I got great yeast rolls, man. I was like, I need some extra money. I'm going to hustle some tips. Now I'm going to seminary, which is like master's degree for religious people that are going into ministry. And so I'm like, I'm just going to do the school thing, but I don't want to serve at church. I'm just putting that on hold. I don't know if this is what I really want to do. And man, I'm sitting with this guy. I've never met him before in my entire life. He looks at my application. He looks at my resume. He goes, Ed, I'm just going to say this to you, man. You don't have what it takes to be a waiter at Logan's. I'm like, excuse me? He's like, yeah, I just don't think this is for you. I don't think this is the job you need. I go, what makes you say that? He says, I don't even know this guy. He goes, I think God's doing something with you about like church stuff. I'm like, huh. So I try to get another job. I'm still unloading trucks. I try to get another job, HVAC. I'm now working with a gentleman I've never met before in my entire life. First day on the job, we're putting duct work into the attic of this house. And while I'm working with some sheet metal, it cuts my thumb pretty bad. He looks at me and goes, hey man, just put duct tape on that. By the way, that fixes everything, right? So I duct tape my thumb. I'm bleeding out. He's like, hey, listen, let's go down there. We'll talk. He goes, get in the truck. He goes, sir, it's not even lunchtime. He goes, this ain't going to work. I was like, sir, I just started. I promise I'll do better. I won't cut myself next time. He goes, no. Like, this ain't going to work. I don't even know this man. I've just been working for him half a morning. He puts me in the truck, starts driving me back to my vehicle, and he says this to me. He goes, this ain't going to work. I'm going to let you go. Preachers have to have pretty hands. I'm like, duct tape around my thumb. I was like, you're letting me go because preachers have to have pretty, which that's not true, by the way. But the fact that he didn't know me and he said that. So I'm still unloading trucks and I'm like, okay, I need a better job than this. So and this is going to blow your ever-loving mind, I now become a security officer, right? So blue blazer, gray polyester pants, pocket protector, deadly weapon that is a number 2 pencil on the inside. And my job from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m., I'm not making this up, was to guard Viagra. I have hit the low of all lows. Now, if you don't know what Viagra is, ask your friend or your family member. They'd love to tell you, right? So, but this just comes on the market. Pfizer is where I'm working. I'm working for the Pfizer lab, but I'm a hired out security officer, 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. My job is to guard Viagra that comes off a truck, and if the box was busted up, I had to protect employees from stealing Viagra and selling it on the black market. I'm like, God, what is going on in my life? I'm getting a drug test for this company because you had to do these random drug tests. I go through the yellow pages, find a church called Faith Baptist Church, cold call. I don't even have a cell phone. Cold call. Hi, my name's Ed. Hi, my name's Brenda, Faith Baptist Church. How can I help you? I was like, I'd like to be an intern at your church. Is that even available? She was like, how did you know that we just posted that job? I was like, I didn't. I'm getting a drug test. I'm drug free, by the way, but I'm just called out of the yellow pages. They give me a shot from October to December 31st. I'm 23 years old. They're like, Ed, we want you to work with 15 college kids. There's a young man that's gotten into some trouble with alcohol, and I want you to help be an intern. And if you can't get your hours, I need you to work maintenance at the church. I'm 23 years old, but at this point, I'm tired of running. I'm like, God, I'll do whatever you tell me to do. I took 15 college kids through the power of God, and revival broke out with 15 college kids that almost led to 85, 90 college kids meeting in our home, 1,200 square foot house. We'd have a Bible study on a Thursday night. These students would park on our lawn. Our neighbors were like, Ed, you guys are throwing some incredible parties. I'm like, no, listen, we're having a Bible study. Revival was breaking out. The church looks at me and goes, hey, Ed, we feel like you should be our recreation pastor and single adult pastor. I'm like, I don't know how to do any of that. I'm not even old enough to drive the church van. And my father in the faith named Danny Sinkfield said, man, I won't let you fail. And I'm telling you, because I met the worship pastor at this church who had a son who was a youth pastor in Troy, Alabama, he calls me and goes, hey, can you bring that guy you're pouring your life into to help? Could you come and be a Bible study leader for 14 to 15 eighth graders in a circle? We have this student conference. I just need you to be a small group Bible study leader. I'm like, cool, I'll go. So we show up on a Saturday night. Chandler Matthews was his name. He looked at me and he said, Ed, God told me you were to preach tonight. I go, hey man, that ain't my deal. Like, I got a learning disability. I don't talk in front of people. I'm more of a circle speaker versus a row speaker. He looked at me and he said, you'll be disobedient to God if you don't do this. I was like, hey, listen, I've been guarding Viagra. I ain't going back to that no more, all right? I'm like, whatever, if that's what the Lord said, yes, I'll do it. Saturday night, youth conference, 300 students. I preached for 8 minutes. I preached everything I knew, done. I'd watched the Billy Graham video that when you get done preaching, you just tell people to come forward if they want to give their life to Jesus. So I was like, hey, if you want to give your life to Jesus, come on down. Like, I was on The Price is Right. I was like, if you want to give your life to Jesus, just come on down. And students started responding. And I'm driving my 1993 F-150 straight bench seat polyester back sweat 5-speed all the way back to Memphis. And I look at this brother I've been pouring my life into and I go, man, I don't know what God's doing, but I think God just called me to be an evangelist. And then all of a sudden, we go back. I tell my wife, 1999 to 2002, I said, baby girl, I said, listen, I don't know what God's got for us. I just feel like God's called us. And in 2002, September 2002, my wife and I said, God, we're all in. And just a few weeks later, we found out we were pregnant with our first kid. God gave us a date before we found out we were pregnant. June 1st, 2003, quit your job at the church. Trust me, I'll take care of you. Didn't even check up. My father thought I was crazy. My friends thought I'd lost it. But my wife and I we were like, God, I ain't going back to guarding Viagra at Pfizer. I ain't doing it. Like, if you just tell it, whatever you tell us to do, we're going to do it. So we quit our job June 1st, 2003, and 5 days later had our first kid. We had no job, no insurance, nothing. And for 3 years, man, we had somebody that we don't even know that bought us groceries every single month. So why is it a big deal for me as a pastor of a church that we feed people? Because I've been on the other side of that feeding line. Been on the other side of that feeding line. But somewhere in the midst of that journey, just trying to be faithful, God providing, putting food on our table. Hey Ed, you don't know me. I'm at a church called Community Bible Church. Man, I just came across a video of you on YouTube. Would you come and speak at our men's conference? 6 years in a row. 2015, Pastor Robert goes, Ed, hey, listen, man, we love you. Feel like God's told you to be the pastor of this church. I was like, Pastor Robert, I've never done that before in my entire life. He goes, God told me. This church was started by Pastor Robert Emmett, 127 people at a La Quinta hotel in our city. Look at it now. God doing great things. But I need you to know, when I look back on my life, I serve a God of second chances that took my mistakes of like, God, I'm going to run from you. And God was like, okay, I'm going to scoop you up by a big fish. and I'm going to get you to where you needed to be. You had no idea it was going to be San Antonio, Texas. You had no idea that I was going to put you in front of the most amazing people in the entire world. And you had no idea that actually you're going to need this church more than this church needs you. And God's going to do something in your heart. But I want you to listen to my spirit today, and I speak this over my family today. And Lola, you probably never heard me say this out loud, but I want you to listen to me. If God called me to be a missionary somewhere in the world, we'd leave. Whatever God tells us to do, we gonna go. If it's a smaller church, bigger, listen, whatever God tells my family to do, we're gonna do it. Because I've learned that if you try to run from God, it ain't gonna work out the way you thought it was gonna work out. And I don't need you to think that I'm exempt on a story like this. So I just wanted to put my heart on the table and go, man, I've been there and it's miserable. Don't be a Jonah. But if you are, know that this sermon is your big fish to get you to the place where God wants you to be. Come on, can we clap to that today? Would that be all right? Let's stand together. And as we stand today, heads bowed, eyes closed, if you've not put your faith and trust in Jesus, today is the day. Some of you have already done that. Say yes to whatever he's called you to do. But today, if you have not put your faith and trust in Jesus, say this to him: Lord Jesus, I'm not perfect, but I believe in you. Save me, change me. I give you my life. If you prayed that prayer in faith, all of heaven rejoices. If you're watching online, text in the number that's on the screen. Our online team's going to show you a lot of love. But if you made that decision today in this room, don't you be embarrassed of Jesus, because he ain't embarrassed of you. And if you gave your life to Jesus today, raise your hand as tall as you can. Anybody in the room today going, I gave my life to Jesus? Amen.